Welcome back, everybody. We're diving into something today that might, well, it might make you think a little differently about the next time a holiday rolls around.
Oh, is this one of those, like the real meaning of Christmas kind of things?
Kind of,
Yeah.
but it's a little deeper than that, I think. We're going to be looking at a passage from Hosea, the prophet,
Okay, yeah. It's really.
specifically Hosea chapter 2, verse 11. And what we're going to be exploring is how this verse, how it speaks to something, maybe a danger that we could be facing today.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What kind of danger?
Well, the danger of, our celebrations, our holidays, our traditions, of them losing their meaning. We've got a really interesting source material here, and I think what we unpack is going to be, well, surprisingly relevant to all of us.
Yeah, I can see how that could be a problem, getting so caught up in the festivities that we forget what we're actually celebrating.
Exactly. And what's interesting is, on the surface, Hosea 2.1, it might seem kind of harsh,
Oh, how so?
Well, God's basically saying he's going to put an end to her rejoicing, talking about Israel's feasts and celebrations.
Yeah.
But then when you dig a little deeper, you look at the context, a more nuanced, picture emerges.
Yeah, context is always key when we're dealing with these ancient texts. So what's the context here? What's going on that would lead God to make such a seemingly harsh statement?
Right. Because it's not like God was against celebrations themselves. It's more like the issue was how the Israelites were celebrating, what they were doing, or rather, what they had turned their celebrations into.
I see. So it's not the act of celebrating itself, but the way they were going about it. What was supposed to be about gratitude and connection with God had become something else.
Exactly. We got to remember that historical and theological backdrop here, right?
Of course. The Israelites were chosen by God, bound to him in that covenant relationship, and all their feasts and festivals, everything from the Sabbath to Passover, these were designed to be outward expressions of that covenant. Those reminders of God's faithfulness and their dependence on him.
Reminders, yes.
But then, we see this over and over again in the Old Testament. They stray from the covenant. They start worshiping other gods, and, their hearts, they just grow distant from God.
The true source of blessing.
Exactly.
And their celebrations, they become a reflection of that, don't they? That internal shift.
Yeah, they weren't just going through the motions. It was deeper than that. It was like they were actively twisting what was holy, something sacred, and turning it into something that went against God's own heart.
It's a key point, isn't it? Think about it. The very things that were supposed to draw them closer to God, the feasts, the harvests, the times of rejoicing.
Right.
It all became, opportunities for indulgence, even idolatry.
Wow. They were celebrating, but not the God who had given them everything.
That's powerful. And it makes that, God's declaration in Hosea 2.1 all the more poignant, doesn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't just about God canceling a party. This was serious stuff.
Right. It was a consequence of their unfaithfulness. They'd turned away from him. And so he was allowing the very things they'd twisted their land, their harvests, even their ability to celebrate, to be taken away.
A consequence of their actions. And the historical narrative, it bears that out, The enemies of Israel, they eventually conquer them, take away their land and independence. They're left in a position where they can't even observe their holidays anymore.
Or celebrate God's provision. Such a stark and painful consequence of losing sight of, what really mattered.
It's a powerful lesson.
Almost like a cautionary tale, And that's what makes this whole deep dive so relevant for us today, right? Because while we might not be, ancient Israelites facing exile, we can still find ourselves in a similar situation, facing the same warnings and reflections.
I see what you mean, yeah.
When it comes to, our own celebrations and how we approach them.
Yeah, that's a good point. It really is fascinating, how this ancient story, it connects to the struggles that so many of us are facing today.
Oh, totally. We might not be, building those golden calves and offering sacrifices like the Israelites were back then.
Right.
But our modern gods, they can be just as subtle and insidious.
Oh, for sure. And they can be, just as demanding of our attention and our devotion.
I see what you mean. Think about it. How easy is it for us to get, caught up in all the consumerism of Christmas, for example?
Oh, yeah. The pressure to buy all the perfect gifts, deck out the house just so, make everything Instagram worthy. It's a lot.
Right. And all of a sudden it feels like we're worshiping at the altar of, materialism more than we are actually celebrating, the birth of Christ.
Precisely. It's like the meaning gets lost in the wrapping paper and the shopping lists, and that's just one example.
It's everywhere, isn't it?
It is. The source material, it highlights how this tendency to just lose sight of the true meaning, it can creep into any celebration, even something as simple as a weekly church service.
Oh, wow.
It can become just another thing on the to-do list, an empty ritual if we're not careful, if our hearts aren't really in it,
Right. We might be physically present, sure,
Yeah.
but are we actually connecting with God? And are we allowing, his presence to transform us?
That's the question, isn't it? Are we really there, or are we just going through the motions?
It's such a good point. And it's so easy to get caught up in the routine of it all, the familiarity, and we just completely forget the original purpose.
Yeah. We get comfortable, and then the meaning starts to fade.
Like we're going through the motions without even really understanding why we're doing them in the first place.
Exactly. And that's where the danger lies, because when our celebrations become these empty rituals, right, when they're not about genuine devotion and gratitude, they lose their power.
They lose their meaning.
Yeah. We become like those Israelites that Hosea was talking about. We're outwardly celebrating, but inwardly we're disconnected from the source of true joy and fulfillment.
Wow. So how do we guard against that? How do we hit that reset button and make sure our celebrations, whether it's religious holidays or even just family gatherings, that they're truly meaningful and life-giving?
That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, the source material, I think it offers us a few clues. First, it's about cultivating a heart of gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude.
Remember those feasts that the Israelites were celebrating, they were originally supposed to be expressions of thankfulness. Thankfulness for all of God's blessings.
Right. Thank you for the harvest. Thank you for bringing us out of Egypt.
Exactly. So the question is, how can we bring that same spirit of gratitude into our modern celebrations?
That's a good question. What would that look like for us today?
Right. Maybe it's taking some time to reflect on all the good things in our lives.
Yeah.
Or, expressing appreciation to the people that we love, our family, our friends.
Reaching out to those who are, maybe going through a tough time.
Yes. Even just finding ways to serve others who are less fortunate. There are so many ways to practice gratitude.
That makes a lot of sense. It's about shifting our focus outward, isn't it? Recognizing that true joy, it comes from, connection and generosity, not just self-indulgence.
It's about giving, not just receiving.
Exactly. What was the second clue you said?
Oh, right. The second thing the source material highlights is the importance of aligning our actions with our beliefs.
Okay, yeah. Walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. If we say we're followers of Christ, then our celebrations, they should reflect that commitment.
Show it, don't just say it.
Right. So we need to ask ourselves, how can we make Christ the center of our Christmas celebrations? How can our Easter traditions point us back to the hope of the resurrection? How can we approach our Sunday services, with a genuine desire to encounter God's presence?
Those are tough questions.
They are, but they're so important to ask.
Oh, absolutely. It's like we need to be constantly evaluating our motivations, checking our hearts to make sure that our celebrations are, they're truly aligned with our faith.
And doing that takes honesty, right? And self-awareness.
Definitely.
We have to be willing to look inward and ask the hard questions. Why am I doing this? What am I really hoping to get out of this celebration? Is it about God? Or is it about something else entirely?
Because if we're not careful, those something else's, they can creep in and take over.
Oh, yeah.
The pressure to, keep up with the Joneses, the desire for social validation, the temptation to just indulge in excess.
It's a slippery slope.
It is. And they can totally distort the true meaning of our celebrations. And we end up feeling, empty and unfulfilled.
It's like we're chasing after something that can never truly satify us.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying is it's not about abandoning celebrations altogether.
No, not at all.
It's more about reclaiming them, right?
Yeah.
Infusing them with a deeper meaning that goes beyond just the superficial.
Exactly. It's about celebrating with purpose, with intention.
And of the heart that's aligned with God's heart.
Yes. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a powerful image to leave our listeners with as we wrap up this part of our deep dive. But before we move on, there's something I wanted to ask you. The source material, it talks about, how the Israelites actually lost their ability to celebrate because of their disobedience.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a risk that we face today as well?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Like, could our modern distractions and our misplaced priorities, could they eventually lead us to a place where we lose the capacity for genuine celebration? That is a really thought-provoking question. And I think the answer might be, well, it might be a little more nuanced than just a simple yes or no, you know?
Okay, so not a straightforward answer.
Right. It's not necessarily about, like, completely losing the ability to celebrate. Like, we're not going to just wake up one day and not be able to have a party.
Right, right.
But it's maybe more about losing the capacity to experience the true joy, the fulfillment, the stuff, that authentic celebration, the stuff that it offers.
I think I see what you mean. It's like we can still go through all the motions. We can have the parties, we can have the gatherings. But if we don't have that deeper connection to something meaningful, then it's all going to feel kind of empty.
Exactly. And the source material, it hints at that. You know, when the Israelites, they lost sight of that why, the why behind their celebrations. Those celebrations, they became, I don't know, like hollow shells, empty ritual.
They lost their substance.
They did.
Yeah.
They were devoid of that life-giving presence that they were supposed to embody. So yeah, they were still celebrating, but it wasn't truly nourishing their souls.
Nourishing their souls, yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I don't know, like eating food but not actually tasting it.
That's a great analogy.
You're going through the motions of eating,
Yeah.
but you're not really getting any sustenance.
And I think that's a real danger for us today, you know, with all the distractions that we have, all those competing priorities that are just constantly vying for our attention. It's so easy to become, I don't know, like numb to the beauty, the significance of our celebration.
Right, we just go through the motions, check off the boxes.
Well, our hearts aren't fully engaged.
Yeah. So how do we combat that? How do we cultivate that sensitivity, that awareness of, well, of the sacred in the midst of, you know, the everyday?
Well, I think it starts with, intentionality. We got to make that conscious effort to step back from the noise, to step back from the busyness, and to really examine our hearts.
Take a deep breath
Yeah.
and like refocus.
Exactly. Ask ourselves, what are we actually celebrating here? Why is it important? How does the celebration, how does it connect to our values, our beliefs, to, even our deepest longings?
Our deepest longings, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like we need to rediscover that childlike wonder, that sense of awe, that gratitude for even the simplest gifts of life.
Absolutely. And it might also involve, simplifying things. Stripping away all the excess, all that pressure to perform, the need to impress everybody. Sometimes the most meaningful celebrations, I think, are the simplest ones.
Yeah.
The ones where we can really focus on just connection and being present in the moment.
Less is more.
Exactly. And remember, this isn't a one-time fix, right? It's an ongoing process. It's a continual recalibration. We got to keep checking in with ourselves.
Yeah, to make sure that our celebrations are still aligned with our truest selves.
Exactly. And asking ourselves those questions, does this bring me joy? Does this nourish my soul? Does this draw me closer to God?
And to the people that we love. Those are powerful questions. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I think the key takeaway for everyone listening is this. Celebrations, they are a gift. They're a beautiful way to connect with something that's larger than ourselves. But, like any gift, they require care and intentionality.
And when we approach them with open hearts,
Yeah.
with the willingness to let go of the distractions and to really embrace the true meaning behind them, that's when those celebrations, they can become, they can become sources of profound joy and connection.
And spiritual nourishment.
Absolutely. So as you go into, this next holiday season, or even just your next family dinner,
Yeah.
remember the lessons that we've uncovered today. Pause, reflect, simplify, and most importantly, celebrate with intention.
Celebrate with intention. That's so good. Well, on that note, thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.